you all on behalf of Mrs. Anna Matthew. She currently working as a principal digital feature writer with the Times of India in Cochin. She has over 15 years of experience in media, PR, and her own entrepreneurial effort in corporate communication. Also, she works as a consultant at a national award winning PR firm, MD Niche, and managed a media team for Kochi Binagel, the biggest art show in India. Welcome, ma'am. Next,
Thank you.
I welcome the senior heads and in charge of all schools. At last, I welcome my dear students and parents. I hope everyone well aware of the theme concerning in the workshop. We had a great time to you all. Wish you all the great success in your pursuit. Without any delay, I'm hand over to you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your welcome. It's always nice to speak to young students. I don't know how many of you might be interested in journalism, but I think we journalists bump into youngsters and people who are mid-career, and journalism always seems to have a particular interest in people. We are considered to be creative thinkers, and it's interesting to see something that we've written. Everyone finds it interesting. I will speak to you. I don't know how many of you already have set in your mind to have a career in journalism. How many of you are, thinking about it? I will speak to you about journalism from my 15 years of, nearly 20 years of experience working in different fields of journalism. I've been in journalism, I've been in PR, like Madam just said. So I hope I can give you a good, well-rounded idea of what the career is and what you can look forward to, what are the different options for journalism, opportunities in journalism in the future. I hope I'm audible and I hope my pace is okay. Am I being clear to everyone?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay. Is my pace okay? Are you? Can you hear me and everything?
Yeah, ma'am. Everything is fine, ma'am.
Okay. So, so journalism is a career that comes with a lot of it's a very sort of emotional career. It's exciting, it's inspiring, it's fast paced, but at the same time, it's also quite stressful. The timings that you work can be very difficult. You have this thing called the graveyard shift, which is like at night. So it's a career with a whole lot of emotions involved with it. And usually journalism is not so much a career that you go in for the money, like IT or the medical field even. Of course, there are journalists who do make a lot of money, but it's generally not a field that you go in for the money. It's usually a field that people take up for passion. I remember as a student of journalism saying that, all of us students in school, our dream was to bring out the truth. And we were also interested in writing. Most people who have a flair for writing want to go into this career. But also it's about, exposing the truth and, informing people. That's the passion that drives journalists. And I think that is why people respect journalism as well, because it's a career that is done out of true passion. Now, journalism, like I said, the plus points of journalism are that, you are published every day. And the main thing about journalism is that you are influencing opinions, whether it's a small thing from what movie to watch. A lot of people, if you want to watch a movie, you say, okay, let's see what that reviewer has said about the movie. So with Times of India, for example, when a movie is out, we are very determined to be the first ones to get the review out, because we want to show, and this is the pace at which journalism works as well. You always have to be the first to bring out a news. That is one aspect of journalism. that is the news reporting aspect of journalism. I am a features writer. That is more creative. I'll come to that. I don't know. Hello. Okay. So yeah, so like I said, journalism, the main important thing about journalism is that you are influencing opinions. So whether it's about watching a movie, whether it's about which government to vote for, whether it's about economic decisions, small scale and large scale. I recently did a story on a port that is starting near Trivandrum. I am in Kochi. I'm based in Kochi in Kerala. This is a port that is starting in Trivandrum, which is about 180 kilometers south of Kochi. It's the capital of Kerala. And I've been doing that story over about nearly a week now, because I've spoken to a lot of people. It's a long feature. And one of the persons that I spoke to today for an update on this story about the port. Now, it's a port that's being started by the Adani Group. Of course, when you have it's one of the biggest ports. It's a transshipment port. So it's one of the biggest ports, container port in India. It's going to be. And it needed central approval. And of course, the Kerala cabinet as well has given the contract to the Adani Group. Now, the work started in 2016, and there are big debates. Now, there's a big protest going on by the fishermen's community about, it causing environmental damage, the port construction causing environmental damage. And today, I spoke to a scientist who is one of the activists who is working for the port. He's pro-port. There are a lot of anti-port protests. He's pro-port. And he comes from an NGO that is supporting the port, and one of the chief members of the NGO, he was actually a former journalist named Elias John. And Elias John has been on a fast against the protests and for the port for, I think today is his third day. No, today is the second day. He started it yesterday. And this scientist, who is also part of the NGO, said to me that, I hope you can do a fair report, because we need people, or we need the government, and we need even people to understand why the port is important. And, your report should influence. There is a man on a hunger strike. You should be able to report fairly why he's on an hunger strike, why he believes passionately about it, and things like that. So that's the level of influence people think that journalists have. And to a large extent, that's true as well, because what you read in the paper every day influences your decisions, like I said, from the smallest thing to how governments operate and things like that. So journalists, so shall I say, we are sort of mini celebrities. Particularly, of course, I am a print journalist. TV journalists are, considered mini celebrities and things like that. Now, I will speak to you about journalism, about today's. I'll give you an idea about journalism from a few points of view. I'll talk about my career, what journalism was like when I started out, what journalism is like now. When I started out was about 20 years back. What a good journalist needs, and what you can do as youngsters. Maybe if you have a dream to get into the field, what you can start to do to build your, shall I say, career, or to build your plan towards becoming a journalist. Now, to start to talk to you about my career, I'm talking about my career because it gives you an idea of how you start off as a journalist, what are the different aspects of journalism. Now, basically, when you start out your career, my career was totally lopsided. It couldn't be more, it couldn't have worked more in reverse. So ideally, when you start out as a journalist, you start out as a reporter. They say cub, there's a term called cub reporter. Cub is usually used for the young one. So this is a cub reporter or a rookie. So you start out as a cub reporter, and then you advance and you become a senior reporter, etc., senior correspondent and things like that. around when you're sort of 50, you work on the desk. When you become on the come on the desk titles are, you usually start out as a sub editor, then you become a senior sub copy editor, then assistant news editor, deputy news editor, things like that. So the differences with reporting and being on the desk and being an editor is, the reporter goes out into the field or talks to different people when he has to do a story, he or she has to do a story, and writes the story and files it. It's called filing it, and it is sent back to the desk. Now, what the desk does is, the desk is usually more experienced. So what the desk does is, it looks at the reporter's story, does basic corrections of grammar, language, makes it easier to read, better to read, more interesting to read. And then gets back in touch with the reporter sometimes about any additions that may need to be done. The story is sometimes, you have to say what the story is about. Sometimes you don't get the context. You need more information. So the desk puts it all together and then hands it over. So once that is done, so now the story is ready for publishing. Then they pass it to the designers. There's a production team, and they put it on page and things like that, and they send it through. Now, I interestingly started out at the desk. So I started as a sub editor. Now, usually someone who's a sub editor has to have a bit of experience, but I started as a sub editor. And at the grand old age of 40 something, I am working as a reporter. So I started my career in reporting, in my 40s, which is very funny. Thankfully, I started as a senior reporter. So that was, I didn't start as a cub reporter because I'd already worked as an editor for so many years. So if you ask me, what is better? I have always wanted to be a reporter. From when I started my career, I've wanted to be a reporter. I have wanted to write. I've wanted to go out, meet people, get stories. I would say that for me, this is a very personal thing, but I would say that's the most interesting part of journalism, getting the stories, writing the story. But there are some people who just want to be desk hands. They don't like reporting. They just want to be at the desk. They want to have the editorial option of journalism. They want to clean up stories. They want to add to stories. So there are two things. Even when I wanted to work as a reporter, when I used to tell my office that I wanted to work as a reporter, they'd be like, no, you're a good editor, So you can be a good editor and you can be a good reporter. Sometimes good reporters can't do editing. Sometimes editors can't do reporting. Ideally, as a good journalist, you should be able to do both. Now, this is something I self-trained in, because after 15 years at the desk, where I was good at the job, because I had 15 years of experience. I had improved at the job. I'd become very good at the job. Even with 15, that's the interesting thing about journalism. Even with these 15 years of experience, when I started in reporting at 40 plus, I still found that, oh my God, okay, reporting has its own quirks. It's difficult in its own way. You think when you're at the desk, you think, okay, you can just go out and get stories, but it's not that easy. Now, what is it, how do reporters get stories? So I've, in my last 4 years of reporting, I have managed to get a few scoops or a few breaking stories. So there are different ways of getting this. Mainly it comes through creative thinking. So you look at because I'm a feature writer as well. So you might see a small story, and how you get a scoop is you dig behind it and think, okay, so if this is the story, if for example you might hear I now work in entertainment. So if you hear a story about a movie doing badly or something like that, you think about and you think, okay, why is it do badly? Or one story that I did was, which was very interesting, was during COVID time, every week you heard of Malayalam movies being made. So now crores are being spent on movies. And every week a new movie would be announced, week after week. And during COVID, of course, movies weren't releasing. So I did a big story on the fact that there were 100 Malayalam movies, that is about 300 crores worth of movies hanging around without being released. So that was a big story. Another way of getting a scoop is by being persistent. If you think something is a story, you keep going back to it, and you might not get it at first, but you keep calling the people and you keep asking different people, and till you finally get the story. You can get a scoop if you're lucky. Because once I spoke to someone for an interview, for an important interview, I didn't get it. He gave the interview to someone else. So I called back the PR person and I said, I've been asking for the interview for so long, and you gave it to another journalist in my office, in fact. So they said, oh, you know what, the next time something interesting happens, we're so sorry, we'll give you the story. So, you have to be persistent and you have to go back. As a journalist, I think one of the important things about being a journalist, as much as writing and creative thinking, is to have a thick skin and to be a bit of an extrovert. I am basically an introvert, but when you are working on this job, you have to be an extrovert. So you keep calling people back and you have to be a bit shameless, because, for me to go back and say that this was my story and you've given it to someone else, and that ultimately led to a scoop when this person, something controversial happened. They called me up first and they said, okay, we had promised you something and we're giving this to you now. So that way, and you keep following up. Now to tell you about, what journalism was like when I started out. When I started out, it was, I didn't experience it, but this was about 2 years, I think, before I joined. The stories were, the final story was manually cut and pasted on page, and these prints were made and things like that. But when I started working as a journalist, it was all done digitally. And journalism is a field that keeps changing and keeps moving and keeps evolving. It's a very important thing to keep evolving according to how society moves. Even our page making software has changed several times over. When I started 15 years ago, it was Quark, then it became PageMaker, and then it's now InDesign. Pages are made in InDesign. So it's a constantly evolving field and you have to keep yourself updated. This is true of most careers, but it's very true of journalism. If you don't evolve, you're a dinosaur, and it doesn't, you're going to be stuck or you're going to be out, which a lot of people found, particularly during COVID. People were not changing according to the ideas of the day, were just, they lost their jobs, particularly designers. Designers have to keep themselves updated, but journalists have to too, language-wise and in every way. Now, journalism today is that, particularly since COVID, since the pandemic, we have found that the physical newspaper took a big beating during the pandemic. A lot of people, and this is what newspaper officers were very alarmed about, while broadcast media. So of course, journalism is in two main, and now a third, which is print media, broadcast media, and social media. A lot of journalism is done through social media as well. Print media took a big beating during the pandemic time. A lot of people stopped. I think newspapers, when salaries were cut and things like that, ad revenues came down, and a lot of people also subscribers came down, because of which, as you know, it's a big cycle. The more number of subscribers you have, the more advertisers are willing to advertise. So when the number of subscribers came down, ad revenues came down. So media took a big beating. But broadcast journalism is still a big thing. now print media is also slowly building back. A lot of, I don't know if anyone's interested in journalism so much that you found out or realized that a lot of newspapers, particularly in the West, very established newspapers were shut down because the mobile phone became a thing. People were reading news on their mobile phones. How newspapers have countered this is by providing, now you have to subscribe. In the early days, you could just go to any of the Western newspapers, such as The Guardian, which belongs to the UK, which is an English newspaper, or the New York Times. The New York Times always had a bit of a subscription model, or the Time magazine, again, an American magazine, very prestigious. Time magazine is the one that did an on the stadium in very sort of slave-like conditions. And they did an expose on it, and Qatar has faced a lot of criticism during this World Cup. So this is the problem with journalism today, that print journalism, which was sort of considered a very prestigious journalism, took a beating. Hopefully it will come back, and it's slowly rebuilding from just the pandemic time. And there is this thing called, which is what I do to an extent, it's called long-form journalism. There are different types of articles that you can write. There are the small articles. At one time when I started my journalism, articles were about 600 words each. Roughly, that was considered the standard size of an article, 600 words, 800 words, up to 1,000 words. That was considered normal. Then I think about 10 years into my career, in the past 10 years, newspaper offices have said, absolutely not. People don't have the patience to read 500 and 600 word articles. So it came down to 300 words. And then now there is a balance, or there is a mix. Sometimes people like to read something now it's called long form journalism. Where articles are 1,000 words or 2,000 words and things like that. There's a particular interest for that sort of. So, like I said, journalism is constantly evolving and changing according to the needs of society, what society demands, and things like that. Now, what are the things that a good journalist needs? Like I said, you have to be creative. You have to be able to think outside the box to get a story. Now, and also you have to, the important thing in journalism is that you have to add value. So everyone is chasing one story. But the important thing is you have to add value to make your story stand out. Now, how the thing is, okay, now to get good stories, like I said, you have to be creative. And what is, how do you, creativity is important in when you write stories. Also, when you're asking questions to someone to get your stories, because if you ask questions creatively, you get better stories. Sometimes you can ask straightforward questions, but in some situations you have to be creative in how you ask questions so that you get good answers and you get good stories. And also too, so it's about writing, it's about how you find stories, creativity in writing, in finding stories, and in asking questions. Now, what are the problems journalists face? A lot of us, like I said, when we started out, it was about speaking the truth, about exposing the truth. Sadly, and this is something to prepare yourselves for if you are interested in journalism, is that a lot of media is very market driven. In the old days, it was not so much, but today it's quite market driven. So you will find, like I said, I had written a story about Vizhinjam, about the port here. So you will always find that two sides of the story. now journalism is supposed to be about unbiased reporting. When you report about a port, for example, there are different issues. The port brings a big economic returns to the country. It helps the government and things like that. It provides employment. On the other hand, it causes a lot of environmental damage. Now, there are two types of reporting. There are sort of environmental journals, which will talk about only the environmental damage that a port causes. And they will suggest that the economic aspects of having a port is not as important as the environmental damage that it causes. So there is that aspect. So journalism is different in that way as well. Now, what do you want to do when you become a journalist? So one thing is, like I said, there are different aspects of journalism. So ideally, it's good to pick a field. I personally, I look at myself as I'm an entertainment journalist. That is more because of sort of my personal, journey and things like that. I've had to go into it. But personally, I like to be a social and environmental journalist. Those are also stories that I do. So I cover gender issues. I cover city civic issues. And I also do a long-form journalism in stories like this. So ideally, when you be a journalist, an important thing to do is pick a subject, for example, development or social journalism or foreign affairs, politics, economics. There are so many branches. I don't know if I said environment, which is a very important aspect in the coming years. Science is a very important aspect. So it's very good to pick a particular form of journalism that you want to do, and sort of hone your expertise in it. Become an expert, and that is how you can become a successful journalist. These are pointers that I'm giving towards if you want to take up a career in journalism. What else does a good journalist need? Read, write. These are things that you have to just constantly do, because a journalist, an important aspect for a journalist is you have to keep learning and you have to keep growing. Now, like I said, there are a lot of journalists who, when I started out, I started out as a print journalist on a magazine, The Week magazine. So I did long articles, and we sort of research was done in a different way. We had librarians who did research for us. We did one article or two articles a week. A reporter would do one or two articles a week. Today, it's very different, of course. All the research is done online by the journalist himself. Newspaper offices do have librarians, but largely the research is done by themselves. And so you have to, it's an evolving field, and you have to stay in touch and you have to keep up. So you can't say, no, I'm used to having two librarians do research for me. So, I'm going to do it that way, or I'm used to writing 600-word articles. I cannot, restrict, because I have done that. I have said, no, but my article is 600 words. What do you mean? I have to cut it down to 300 words. That is just the demands of journalism at that time. And you have to be willing to change according to the demands of the time. So these are the things that a good journalist needs at any time. When I started journalism, I was sure I didn't want to do broadcast journalism. I'm not a broadcast journalist, but now I do videos because it's an important thing for the print journalist that you have to do videos as well. Because on social media, like I said, everyone is reading the news or looking at the news on their phones. So there's only so much they want to read. They want to see the news. So they're looking for videos. So this is something you have to change. You have to put your news on social media, on Insta and on Twitter. I think I've had an Insta handle for about a year now, but I've started putting news on the Insta handle for only about 2 months now. But I've realized that you have to keep moving to with the others as well, because a lot of things now. So I have started, and if I want to be a good journalist, I have to move with the news as well. So an article for my print media, I put all the social handles. So for a journalist, the important things, what makes a good journalist is one, the ability or the willingness to learn all the time. You have to constantly be willing to learn new things, and you have to read a lot. You have to keep writing to improve your language, to improve your skills as a journalist. Now, what can you read and what can you write? As youngsters, as students, I would say write light-hearted stuff on things that you see and put it on your Facebook or put it on your Insta. Take a picture and put small pieces. I mean, this will give you good practice if you want to be a journalist. Read everything. Of course, read the newspaper. I don't know how many of you read the newspaper. This is a big, I think, even as parents, I am a parent. And this is a struggle with kids, making them read the newspaper. But read the newspaper, read fiction, read non-fiction, read blogs. Blogs are an important way to see how language is developing. A lot of people connect to blogs because blogs are very sort of, casually written and things like that. I'll give you an example. We had a story, one of my colleagues wrote a story during the pandemic time about women police officers in this place called Thrissur, which is just north, about 1 hour north of Kochi, where I am. They had a service. They used to go out on their bullet bikes and monitor the COVID situation in villages around Thrissur. They were a sort of very appreciated squad. Even the state police chief was very impressed and said, this is a model that has to be copied everywhere. So it's a bit of an interesting story. It's slightly serious and slightly sort of, casual, light story. When I was editing the story, my colleague did this very interesting story. And when I was editing it, I wrote that the police officers have a lot of LOL experiences to share. So these are small, quirky language elements that you can bring in to make your stories interesting, to get people engaged with your story. In my Vizhinjam Port story, I started with saying, how the sea is such an important part of myth and legend and literature and song and movies and stuff like that. So always bring interesting elements into the story to make it readable. Now, what is journalism of the future? I think I'm almost ready to wind up. I think I have 5 more minutes before I think I open the floor up to questions. So please feel free to ask anything. What is journalism of the future? Now, like I said, print media faced a big problem during the pandemic time with a loss of readership. A loss of readership and things like that. But it is still regarded as the, and so a lot of people started depending on social media. But as you all probably know, social media has a lot of fake news. Now, I work for the Times of India, and the Times of India has always faced criticism. I have found, and I have read, and I have seen people say this, that, Times of India has a lot of fake news. But I can tell you as a journalist with Times of India has its problems. I'm not saying no. But as a journalist with Times of India, we absolutely do not carry news that is not verified. Every single line that we write is verified, no matter how controversial. We do not create news. and so it's always verified, and that's the prestige that the print journalism has, the newspaper has, over social media. Broadcast journalism is the same as print media. The news by prestigious news organizations, no matter what others say about it being fake or something has been twisted, even if by error we misquote someone or make a statement that is not what the person has said, we will always correct it because they can take us to court. There are stories that we are able to do, sometimes controversial stories, but we feel that it will harm the person, so they might harm us in turn. So we always check with the legal team. So a lot of precautions are taken when stories are done in print media. And I think this is why print media will always be an important aspect. I mean, even if print is on the down, the news is always, reliable, and it's credible news. In fact, from the time that I've started journalism, I've heard that, infotainment is a big word, that, we have to make news is about information and entertainment, because, today's people, they want entertainment as much as they want information. So infotainment was a big thing that I heard. And you've probably, I mean, a lot of you must be knowing about BuzzFeed. BuzzFeed was creating news that was very much more inclined towards the entertainment aspect. And in fact, President Obama, during one of his sort of White House, he does an annual, or all the presidents, American presidents, do a White House correspondence dinner. And he said that, every year BuzzFeed is getting more popular and New York Times is getting less popular. I think when he said it about 8 years or 9 years ago, this was very true, and that New York Times was getting worried about where BuzzFeed was standing. But actually, today, BuzzFeed's main editor has moved on to New York Times. So I think newspaper journalism will always be an important part of journalism. But also, I think in the future, there are things like social media, which is also an important part of media. This is something that all newspapers and broadcast media calls for. So these are the areas of journalism that will always operate in the future. Like newspaper, you can find newspaper, print, newspaper, broadcast, and social media, if that is what you're interested in. So someone has said, I think my time to tell you about my thing is over. You can ask me questions. I think someone asked me to share an incident, a story. Okay, I will tell you about one of the biggest scoops that I've got. It was, like I said, I work I'm an entertainment journalist. So, a movie has big money riding on it. And I once, I was just sort of calling up all the stars, just like that. This is where luck comes into play. So I was calling up all the stars, and I could up. I don't know if you know the actor Suresh Gopi. Suresh Gopi's son was, starting his career, and he acted in a movie called Sayana Varta. So I just happened to call him up, and I said, what's the latest? What movie are you doing? Do you have anything interesting to tell me about your latest projects or things like that? And he gave me a story that is a bit sort of, political and things like that. And he said, you know what, I worked on this movie called Sayana Vartagal, but the producers, the same people who spent money on making the movies, are not releasing it because Suresh Gopi has BJP connections, and the producers didn't want to release it because Suresh Gopi's son, Gokul Suresh, who worked on the movie, helped his father campaign. So the producers were anti-BJP, and they didn't want to release the movie. And he was shocked because this was one of the movies of his early movies in his career. So, that a movie that he worked on. So he said, and it was a big story. The producer who spent crores on a movie is not releasing the movie. It's a big story. So I said to him, are you sure? Are you willing to go on record that? Can I type the story? He said, yeah, fine. Anyway, they're not doing it. So why don't you file the story? So the next day I went to my office. Everyone was shocked. How is it possible the producers are not willing to release a movie? And again, I did the whole story. And sometimes if it's a very important story, we send it back to the person and we say, is this, is it actually like this and stuff like that. So I sent it to him and he said, yeah, fine. He got a bit nervous. He said, can you change this line and that and that, because it's a bit political and big money is riding on it. So I said, fine. And then we sent the story. I also, as a journalist, you have to get both sides, like I said. So I also called up the producer and I said, see, this, Gokul Suresh has said this to me, that you're not willing to release the story, release the film on which you spend crores. And, what do you have to say? So producer said, no, nothing like that. What are you talking about? And, that's, it's all been resolved and stuff like that. So I said, is a movie releasing? He said, yeah, whatever. Yeah, he wouldn't say anything. So I said, in my story, I said, the producer had been called for comment, but he did not make any commitment. And the story came out the next day. And the producer was really angry. And he called up and he said he was going to sue the company for bringing out false news, and who spoke to me, who told me all this news, and how could I publish it and things like that. And of course, so my parents got a bit scared because they thought, producer, powerful person, they might take a done. And my mother was like, no, withdraw the story. So I said, no, it's already done, it's gone. But so we spoke to the legal department in the office and they said, well, as long as you have the recording of Gokul Suresh saying this and all that sort of thing, and the recording of the fact that you also called up the producer and told him to give his version of the news, that is fine. So that was something interesting that happened to me when I did a story. A couple of things like this have happened. So, it always keeps you on the toes. I think 3 people have told me. One, a lawyer told me that she would sue me, that I had misquoted her. When she saw the story in print, I had told her that I'm going to do the story. I had interviewed her. But this is the other thing. People will make controversial statements, but when they see it on print, they get very nervous to say, oh my God, now my family will see this, that I said this. They get nervous when they see it in print. But when you ask them a question, they'll be very brave and they'll say this and that. But when she saw it on print, she got a bit nervous and she said she would sue me and she would sue the company and tell the editor to call me and things like that. So I got very nervous. I was just starting out as a reporter. I got very nervous. And I was sort of literally next to tears. I told my editor and he said, okay, calm down. I gave him the recording. I had written exactly what she said. I hadn't made up anything. So he said, we are absolutely on safe ground. There's nothing to, I'm not even going to call her. I'm not going to call her. So if she has a problem, let her call back. She can sue, but nothing's going to happen because this is what she said. So I was nervous for a couple of days, but I think she also realized that she didn't have a case that was dropped. So like I said, newspapers are very credible. We always cross-check the story. We always confirm with the person. We are speaking to, is it okay to say this and stuff like that, and only then do the story. Investigative journalism. This is a bit tricky. It can be a bit sort of, it's very interesting. Investigative journalism and crime journalism are usually things that men go into, but I mean, there are women investigative journalists here. For my Virginium report, actually, I did a bit of investigative journalism. Now, investigative journalism, like I said, again, you have to be creative. Sometimes you hear a certain report. Now, the thing is, you have to, basically you're going behind, you want to know the story behind the main story that everyone sees. The way to do investigative journalism is to speak to as many people as possible to get a full picture. Of course, there are things like sting journalism and things. Sometimes it works. Mostly, there's an element of sleaze to it. Ideally, I like investigative journalism. I encourage investigative journalism. It's a good field to go into. It's a very promising field. It's a field with prospects. It's difficult to get into investigative journalism. But you know it's at various levels. It doesn't just have to be crime. It can be sort of a business deal, or like I said, even this Vizhinjam report that I did is a bit of investigative journalism. Some entertainment stories that I do are investigative journalism. So you can do it in any field. It doesn't have to be in crime. But it's about being patient. It's about contacting different people. It's about knowing the background thoroughly so that when people talk to you, they can give you, they know that you know so much and they will not bluff you. So it's a very interesting field of journalism. And you can do it in different fields, and it's a very sort of, it's a field with good options always. And you can do it in any field, like I said, in whether you do environmental journalism or financial journalism, you have to do investigative journalism. I mean, that is true journalism in whichever field you cover. I will tell you, I mean, about my Vizhinjam story, actually. I keep coming back to the Vizhinjam story because it's the last story I did. It's a 2,000-word long report, and it's a bit of an investigative piece. A lot has been written about the port in Kerala already. I was asked to write about the fishermen's protests. So interestingly, when I started out, again, you know, I had to investigate what the situation was like, because the port is a 7,525 crore project. So it's a huge project. And again, you know, at the end of the report, my mother was absolutely scared that, you know, either the protesters or the port authorities will come and kill me, because it's such a tricky story to do. So when I started out, I was pro-protesters. I was for the protesters. After I spoke to a few people, I became pro-port. Then I became pro-protesters again and pro-port. So it was a very difficult, tricky story to do. The 1,800 word story, I have spoken to about 8 people. So it's, you know, it's a huge project. No, actually, I spoke to more people. I spoke to about 12 people. I've quoted 8 people for the story. So that's how you do an investigative story. It requires a lot of patience. It requires a lot of persistence. And you have to sort of, you know, keep going at it for a good investigative story. Any more questions? See, when you do a crime story, how you cover it is, you usually cover it from how the investigators look at it. I had a friend who, I don't know if you've heard about the cyanide murders in Kerala, where this woman over about 15 years, she killed about 8 members in her family using cyanide, from a baby to her father-in-law. So this is how you do it is you have to, mainly the story is of course done from the police's point of view. But the thing is, the police will give you, and also that's the main way story. This idea of what the victim was like, you know, what his life was like, and that's how you build a beautiful story. You know, this crime happened. You talk about the victim, but You raised a very interesting point. It's a very good question because we had a huge a Jisha murder case here where the murder was done by an immigrant worker. So one interesting story that emerged from that is out of the whole bunch of stories, an interesting story that came was from a reporter who went to Bengal to the house of the criminal who did it, the murderer, and spoke about the conditions in which he grew up. He didn't have a father and things like that. So that was it. It's very important. I mean, so it talks about society when you do a story from the, showing what sort of upbringing the criminal had. That's the important part of journalism. It's not only about reporting a crime. It's about why the crime has happened. So it's important. It's a very good question. Like I said, it's an important thing to do a story from the part of the victim and from the part of the perpetrator, the criminal, to show you why society functions like this and who for that. For example, we hear about drug cases and things like that. So why do people take drugs? When that is exposed, that's an important expose to do. When that is exposed, society hopefully changes, parents take action or say, this is not how to bring up children. This is the action that has to be done. So that is why journalism is important, because you're opening your eyes to situations that people face and, why a criminal becomes a criminal. So it's important to do a story from both sides. Good question. Any more questions?
Students, do we have any more questions?
Someone has asked, what do you do for survival during investigation? I think you just, one thing, you just, like I said, journalism profession of passion. You just have to be willing to face the dangers, but mostly your office will protect you because they have a responsibility to a journalist, because you are doing the story for your media organization. So, protection is provided by the office. If there's anything the number of times, of course, I haven't had danger to my life, unlike my parents feared, not really. But even if there is, the office will mainly provide you protection and, or even get sort of police protection for you and things like that. How to write an article with a twist in crime stories. Like I said, see, the basic thing is particularly in crime stories, because it involves people. That's what you have to realize. It's not about getting a controversy. Actually, someone recently asked me, when you as a journalist, when you ask questions, are you looking for controversy? Of course, we are looking, for stories that will create a buzz, that will create controversy. But having said that, you have to remember that you're dealing with people. You have to put yourself in their shoes. How will the person, because there is a person who's already suffering, there's already a victim, and there's also a criminal. Now, we cannot call a person a criminal until he has been convicted. So that person is also sort of innocent till proven guilty. So we're talking about people and people's emotions and lives here. So it's not about creating controversy or how you do crime stories with a twist. It's the twist will come when you're sincere to the story that you're doing. Like I said, the most interesting story in this murder story that for me that came out was the upbringing of the criminal, that he came from such a poor family where he had no food. He was one of 8 children whose father wasn't working, and so that was the most interesting thing for me, that oh my god, our society has people like this, and that is why criminals are born, and we have to change that. So that's the most important. So you have to think out of the box. Now, how do you get a good story? Like, this journalist decided that everyone is talking about Jisha, the girl who died. Let me find out what he was like, the criminal is like. So that's how, you have to think creatively too. But always remember that you're dealing with people, and, if it's whether it's a victim or whether it's a person, the criminal, it's always people you're dealing with, and you have to be empathetic and sympathetic.
Ma'am, actually, the students are there in groups, so they'll have a lot of questions. It'll be like a single user, and many students are using that single user point of view, and they're sitting in the classes and hearing your session. So I'll be sending a feedback form where they will ask the questions. I'll forward even the questions to you, ma'am.
Okay.
So I'll just ask, like, if there are any more questions, or we can end this session.
Sure.
Students, do we have any more questions?
Okay, everyone seems to be interested in crime stories. It's a sort of important part of journalism. So how do you frame a crime story? Someone else. How do you... so basically, the first part of crime reporting comes from the police, what the police say. So the first, the most important thing about crime writing is that you get the news out fast. That's what everyone, particularly if it's a sensational case, you want to get the story out fast. And the first point of contact is, of course, the police. They will tell you. Then I think the way to go about a story, and not just in crime writing, any form of journalism, is to get the story from as many angles as possible. Speak to as many people as possible. So you speak to the police, you speak to the family of the victim, or if it's not a fatal incident, you speak to the victim, you speak to the doctor, if there's a doctor, medical team, if there's a medical team involved. So the way to do a story is, and like I said, not just a crime story, any story, is to get as many voices in, because you want to, when a person reads a story, he wants to read what different people think about this one incident. That's how you form your opinion, right? Okay, so the police says this. Okay, but do you believe the police? Police will always say this. What is the person who underwent the crime? How does he feel? So you want to know what he says. You want to know sometimes what the criminal thinks when he was doing this, or you want to know what others in the investigative team thought. So you try to give as many voices, and that is the important thing of a story. You give as many voices to the story so that the person who's reading the story knows how to form an opinion. Knows what to make of the whole situation. And that is how you form a story. That's how you write it, how you script a story. Again, particularly in a criminal story, I don't know if script writing is the right word to put it, way to put it, because it's factual writing, not so much a script. So see, these are small things, but important elements in journalism, because We deal only with facts, remember. We cannot think what we have to deal with what people are saying, what the facts are. Data is also very important in journalism. Thank you. Reporting, basically, for newspaper reporting, you have to, if something happened, speak to one person, two people, and report an incident that has happened. You have to write it immediately. Feature writing, you can get anything from 3 days if it's a big feature to, if it's a big, huge investigative feature, some publications will give you sort of a week to write it. In today's journalism, I'm saying. In the old days of journalism, you got the luxury of writing a story over 2 weeks. You went and met the people. You learned data. You analyzed the data. You looked at maps and things like that, and you wrote the story. Today, you have to be faster. So a long feature will get up to a week, but otherwise stories are written like this. You have to, if it's a happening, you have to write it in sort of an hour after an incident, because it's already there on broadcast on the TV. So even print people have to put it out on social media, online in an hour. So. In an article, what do you do if there is anything wrong in the article that you've written, or if you make a mistake? Now that's called misinformation. So basically, ideally, that is unforgivable. You don't put, if you don't know anything, don't put the information, but don't give wrong information. That is sort of like the cardinal rule in journalism. Don't give wrong information. But of course, anyone can make a mistake. If you do make a mistake, the main thing is that, you rewrite, you give a correction the next day, or basically you have to give a correction, or you correct it online. Online, you can change it, but it's in my office, for example, they say my boss doesn't even allow to make any changes online, which can be done. Of course, in print, you can't make a change. He says, you just have to give correct information. It's all there in the recording or anything, you can't put anything, you can't make up a quote or anything like that. So don't make mistakes. If you want to, someone asked about, if you want to work for yourself. Basically, I work for myself briefly, and in today's journalism, and in the journalism of the near future, at least, journalism has changed so much. So I don't know, in the distant future what it will be like, but in the near future, at least, it's very easy to work for yourself. Today, a lot, you can report using your mobile phone. You can take pictures and you can put it up on social media. You can start a platform. You can blog. So it's not that difficult at all to write for yourself in today's, and be a citizen journalist, or even have the beginnings of a media organization that you start yourself. Like I said, in the future, it's very possible. Not the future, now it's very possible now. If you're interesting enough, if you get interesting news, it's not even that difficult to find advertisers and things like that. That's the beauty of today's journalism, which was not there even 10 years back. Oh, how do you feel when you wrote your first article? Someone has asked. It was absolutely fantastic. I mean, to see your first byline, to see that you've written and it's been published and your name is there, people are reading it, you're making people think. It's an amazing feeling. I remember I was going on the train and someone was reading the Week magazine, which I started my career with, and my name was in the magazine, and I was so excited, and I was thinking to myself, oh my God, you know that my name is, you're reading something that I've written in that. So it's very exciting, and like I said, this is what journalism is mainly about. It's about passion more than the money. The passion to see your words go out there, your thoughts go out there, the fact that others are reading you and being influenced by you. So you have a big responsibility, and it's absolutely wonderful. I mean, who doesn't like to give free opinions? So it's like giving your opinions, but it's people are reading and you're getting paid for it. So it's really good to see your. I mean, I was very thrilled with my first article. Everyone's proud of you. Your family is very proud of you. Yeah, the struggle is real, my friends. The struggle is real. Someone asked me, did you struggle when you started out in journalism in the first years? Absolutely. Like I said, I wanted to do reporting. I've always wanted to do reporting. I had to work 15 years at the desk before I went into reporting. I mean, the desk it worked very well for me. I was, known to be good at my job. So I was appreciated for my job. And I was given good work, and I got awards and things like that. But I always had that dream of I want to write, and getting out there and being able to write is difficult. Then what you are allowed to write. So there are all those struggles in journalism. Yeah, the first few years can be difficult, but it can also be rewarding when you do do something that that you wanted to do, and that is great when you write something that influences others. So sometimes celebs have called me and said, oh, absolutely, thank you so much and for writing that. On mental health, I mean, in entertainment, mental health and depression and things like that are a big thing that's talked about now. So a lot of celebs have called, and you influence people in different ways. So I do gender-based stories. So again, mental health and patriarchy and things like that are some things that I've written about. So yeah, it's really important, and it's an important job. I think there is a bit of sort of positive and negative. Someone has asked me how my parents felt when I wanted to join journalism. I think today it's a bit more different, but I think when I started out as a woman in journalism always have had plenty of women. But there's always this thing about, the working hours are very odd. You have to go out and meet people, which can be, taxing physically and things like that. So I think they might have been a bit worried, but they were largely supportive. My parents were largely supportive. And again, to see my bylines, to see the articles that I'd written from the very beginning, they were very proud about that. So I think it was generally okay. But I know some parents can struggle with, kids going into journalism. But I guess you can, turn their opinions when they see the articles that you've written and see people appreciating that. Can you give any motivation for journalism? Like I said, journalism is about influencing opinions, big and small. And someone has asked another question about, whether journalism actually makes any change. Both are good questions. To be very, very honest, I'll be brutally honest. It doesn't make, you feel that it doesn't make as much change as it needs to. But I think it's a very important job, because there are, across all fields, it exposes injustice. For example, newspapers talk about, there are about 30 lakh pending cases in our Indian courts from 50 years. So, journalism, I mean, the courts are above the law. No one criticizes. I mean, even ministers don't criticize the courts. Or judges. So, we expose things like that. So many people are suffering with court cases and things like that. Can you imagine 30 lakh cases? So, you expose things like that. You expose environmental hazards, even city issues like, pothole roads. Newspapers take up campaigns. Now, campaigns are a way to make a change for journalism, to bring change. So in the earlier days, campaigns are something that started, I think, I have noticed that it started about 5 years after I started my career in journalism, because if you wrote one article about a road with potholes, it didn't make a difference. No one cared. The ministers didn't care. The local authorities didn't care. So then newspapers started this thing called campaign journalism, where they wrote about it day after day after day after day. And, here, all our Malayalam newspapers and television channels do that. They do campaigns about roads, they do campaigns about quarrying, they do campaigns on to help cancer patients, because cancer is a big thing in Kerala. The number of cancer patients are huge in Kerala. So, things like that. You can do campaigns about different things. So I think campaign journalism, which is a big thing over the years, and now it's a big thing, starts making a difference. People have to take action. Administrators feel that they're forced to take action, because every day when they look at the news, TV news, or when they open the newspaper, it's the same thing being mentioned tirelessly again and again. And that is one way in which journalism makes a difference to our everyday lives. These are issues that affect us in our everyday lives. Yeah, I think, when you do a crime story, one important aspect of writing a crime story is that you have to give, sadly, people like crime stories. There is a sort of, great interest in crime stories. So one of the ways to make a crime story interesting, not one of the way, the key way to make a crime story interesting is to go to the place, give a feel for the atmosphere. Like I said, this Jisha case, which was, this girl was raped. She was a very young 21-year-old girl from a very poor single mother. She lived in a sort of shed with her mother, and on a canal. It wasn't their own land, even it was a Poromboku land. And so she was a Dalit young girl, but she was determined to improve her conditions, and she was studying law. So you have to go to the place so that you report on the scene, and and people develop an empathy. Only then, only if you, this is an important aspect of journalism, that you particularly print journalism and even visual journalism, that you create visuals where people go into the story, and they feel that and be able to identify. You realize what their conditions are like. It could be any of us. So yes, it is important to go to the place and do reporting. Very important. Good question. What are the pros and cons of being a journalist? The pros are, like I said, it's amazing to think that, and it's not your opinion. You're not influencing people with your opinion. You're influencing people with, facts. So if I write about a port, The fact is that it will bring economic development. The fact is also that it is bringing environmental damage. Now, the fact is that why are they pursuing the port even though there is a environmental damage? Because the scientists say that in this area, when construction happens in this area, it's called the scientific thing called a subcell, and there is no damage outside the subcell. It's a natural phenomena where construction activity, everything that affects all the effects of the construction activity are only felt within that subcell. It's not felt 15 kilometers north of the place, which is where these fisher people are holding their protest. They're saying it's affecting us. But the scientists are saying, no, it won't affect you, because scientifically it's not possible for you to get affected. So basically, you bring sort of the facts and everything of a story, and you're telling them. So informing them, that's the you're influencing. So that's the pro of journalism, and you're respected for that. One of the biggest pros, like I said, one main con of journalism is that the money is never. I mean, you will never find a journalist saying, "I'm so pleased with my salary." That's a big con, a negative in journalism. But one of the biggest pros of journalism is that wherever you go, I mean, everywhere that I go, whether I go to a police station or whether I go to a hospital, whether I go to an airport, when I go to my son's school, you say that you're a journalist, and people will always have a bit of respect for you. And, they know that because journalists are seen as people who have reading, who have worldly knowledge and things like that. So they'll always say, "Oh, wow, you're a journalist." Or, it shows that you have a certain level of intelligence and thinking that is not, like not an IT man or a doctor where you're thinking in one thing. You have a broad knowledge and things like that. So the main pro of journalism is the respect that you get. And I have found that firsthand anywhere. As a journalist, you're respected. People want to talk to you, things like that. The biggest con is that the money isn't good in all forms of journalism. Someone asked me how it is when you see the place of crime for the first time. I think, as a journalist, I think the first time when you see something, it's a bit worrying, but you have to be tough. That's the biggest thing about a journalist. You have to be whatever you do, you have to be brave. You have to be tough, you have to be bold. And like I said, these are the reasons why people respect you, because you're willing to go to places that other people don't have access to or don't go to. So, you just have to, you have to appreciate, it's a very sort of special situation that you're in. So wherever you go, whether it's to a crime scene or, whatever, I've always been excited about wherever I've had to go, to be honest, personally. It's also sad, of course, but yeah, it's if you write something and someone asks me, do you feel bad if you write something and it doesn't reach the public? Absolutely sad. This has happened to me, not much, but I'm sure it happens to a lot of journalists as well. At least once, that you write something and the office might want it written in a different way, or they'll reject what you've written and say it doesn't work. And you know why that is, because it doesn't satisfy everyone. You have to satisfy advertisers, and it's not about the office is never scared of politicians, or that is something I haven't seen that. That they're scared that if the news goes out, the politician will feel bad or the policeman will feel bad. Personally, I haven't seen that. I think journalism is fearless in that way. The home journalists or the organization is more scared of is the market. Will we get advertising? We don't want to scare, or we don't want to make an enemy of the businessman. And usually that is a sort of story that doesn't go out. So that can be disappointing, but yeah, you kind of, I don't know, you just have to roll with the punches. You cannot dwell on, bad moments. You just have to move on to your next story. Broadcast journalism is basically TV journalism. Someone else asked me, what is broadcast journalism? It's TV journalism. When I started out, radio was also there. Now, of course, most people just listen to the radio for music and, that sort of RJing and things like that. Not so much for the news. But when I got into journalism, these were the streams of journalism that was taught, print and broadcast. So broadcast also includes TV. Now it's only TV journalism. And today we have this new field called social media journalism.
Okay, students, we'll have more questions in the feedback form what I'm sending. So as of now, I don't want to waste more time of ma'am's work. So
thank you so much. I mean, I'm really happy with that the kids were so interested and came forward with so many questions. It's always nice to see a good response like that. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the session. I hope I've been able to give you a comprehensive picture of what journalism is like. Yeah, please feel free to get in touch with me for any more questions.
Sure, ma'am. Sure, ma'am. Your experiences will actually be the stepping stones for our students to get into journalism. Thank you so much for sharing all these things, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Bye, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, ma'am.